In 2008, a team of archaeologists was digging through a cave in Siberia. They weren't expecting to find anything significant. They found a bone. Not a skull, not a jaw, not a weapon. A single finger bone, the size of your thumbnail, from a child. It was 60,000 years old. And when scientists ran its DNA, the results were so strange, so completely outside anything they had ever seen, that they initially thought the machine was broken. It wasn't. What they had found was not a Neanderthal. It was not modern human. It was something else entirely. A third kind of human. One that had walked this earth alongside your ancestors, eating, hunting, dreaming, surviving, for hundreds of thousands of years, and then vanished. Except they didn't fully vanish, because right now, sitting somewhere in your own DNA, there is a small fragment of code that does not belong to Homo sapiens. It belongs to them. For most of human history, we believed the story was simple. Homo sapiens evolved in Africa, we spread across the world, we met Neanderthals, they died out, we won. That was the clean version, the textbook version. The version that made us feel like the inevitable outcome of evolution. But science has a habit of destroying clean stories. And in 2010, when a team led by geneticist Svante Pääbo published the full analysis of that Siberian finger bone, the clean story ended. Because the DNA inside that fragment did not match modern humans. It did not match Neanderthals. It was a third branch of the human family tree that nobody knew existed. They called them the Denisovans, named after the cave where that tiny bone was found, Denisova Cave, in the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia. And from that single fragment of a child's finger, scientists have now reconstructed an almost complete picture of a species that shaped human history in ways we are only beginning to understand. Let's go back to that cave. Denisova Cave sits at an elevation of 700 meters in the Altai Mountains, a cold, remote stretch of rock that straddles what is now Russia, Mongolia, China, and Kazakhstan. It had been occupied for a very long time. Stone tools in the cave date back 300,000 years. Humans of various kinds moved through it for millennia, left their tools, left their fires. But in 2008, in a sediment layer that dated to somewhere between 48,000 and 60,000 years ago, researchers found that small curved fragment of a fifth finger bone. From a child. Estimated age, between 5 and 7 years old at death. They almost didn't bother analyzing it. Fragmentary child bones from that era are not unusual. But they sent it to Leipzig, to Svante Pääbo's ancient DNA laboratory at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. What he got back from that finger stopped his team cold. The mitochondrial DNA, the genetic code passed down through the maternal line, was unlike anything in their database. It had diverged from both modern humans and Neanderthals, approximately 1 million years ago. 1 million years. For context, Neanderthals and modern humans diverged from each other roughly 400,000 to 500,000 years ago. Whatever this child was, it came from a lineage twice as ancient as the split between us and our closest known relatives. This was not a variation. This was not a subspecies. This was a separate human species, hidden in plain sight, buried in a cave in Siberia, identified from a DNA the size of your thumbnail. In 2010, Pääbo's team published their findings in Nature. The scientific world went quiet for a moment and then erupted. A new human species, discovered not from fossils, but from DNA. It had never been done before.
Here is where it gets strange. Because after more than a decade of research, we still don't know what the Denisovans looked like. Think about that. We have their genome. We have sequenced their DNA more completely than some living human populations. We can tell you their eye color, their likely skin tone, their blood type, but we cannot draw their face with certainty, because the physical remains are almost nothing. From Denisova Cave, the total physical evidence of an entire human species consists of one finger bone, 3 teeth, enormous wide-set molars that do not match any known human species, a partial jawbone discovered in Tibet in 2019, a skull fragment announced in 2023. That is it. An entire branch of humanity reduced to a handful of fragments across 3 sites. But what the DNA tells us is extraordinary. The Denisovans were not primitive. They were not simple. They had been present across a vast swath of Asia for hundreds of thousands of years, from the cold plateaus of Siberia all the way down through Southeast Asia and into what is now the Pacific. They adapted to the high altitude of the Tibetan Plateau, an environment so oxygen-deprived that most modern humans cannot survive there without decades of adaptation. They made jewelry, a chlorite bracelet found in Denisova Cave, polished, precisely drilled, dated to approximately 50,000 years ago. At the time, this level of craftsmanship was considered impossible for any human species other than Homo sapiens. They weren't just surviving, they were creating. Now, here is the part that changes everything. When Peibo's team compared the Denisovan genome to modern human populations around the world, they found something no one had predicted. The Denisovans had not simply disappeared, they had merged. Sometime between 50,000 and 15,000 years ago, as modern humans migrated out of Africa and spread across Asia, they encountered the Denisovans, and they interbred. Not once, multiple times, in multiple locations. Today, populations in Papua New Guinea and Aboriginal Australians carry approximately 4 to 6% Denisovan DNA, the highest concentration on Earth. Indigenous populations across Southeast Asia, the Philippines, and the Pacific Islands carry between 2 and 4%. Tibetan people carry a specific Denisovan gene variant, EPAS1, that allows their bodies to function in low-oxygen, high-altitude environments. Without it, they could not live on the Tibetan Plateau. This gene was not something they evolved independently. It came directly from the Denisovans who lived there for hundreds of thousands of years before them. The Denisovans gave the Tibetans the ability to survive their own homeland. And here is the number that should stop you. Scientists currently estimate that between 4 to 6% of the total modern human gene pool contains Denisovan ancestry. Roughly 300 million people alive on Earth today carry a measurable fragment of Denisovan DNA, not as a relic, not as junk code, as functional genetic material that shapes immune response, metabolism, altitude adaptation, and possibly, the research is still early, aspects of cognition and behavior. The species that nobody talks about is, in a very real biological sense, still here. But the Denisovan story does not end with interbreeding. It deepens into something far stranger. In 2019, researchers analyzing remains from the Baishia Karst cave on the Tibetan Plateau found a jawbone. Robust, ancient, with those characteristic massive molars. Protein analysis confirmed it as Denisovan. It dated to at least 160,000 years ago, making it the earliest confirmed Denisovan remains ever found outside Siberia. At 160,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had not yet left Africa. The Denisovans were already living at 3,280 meters altitude, thriving, building lives in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. Then, in 2021, a partial skull from a Chinese cave nicknamed Dragon Man was proposed by some researchers as possibly Denisovan or a closely related lineage. Analysis is ongoing. The debate in paleoanthropology is fierce. And in 2023, a skull fragment from Denisova Cave itself, identified through ancient protein analysis, added another data point to a picture that keeps getting more complex. What the emerging evidence suggests is not one Denisovan population, but multiple, potentially distinct populations spread across an enormous geographic range. Different in appearance, different in adaptation, possibly different enough from each other that calling them all simply Denisovan may itself be an oversimplification. We may not have found a third type of human. We may have found a fourth and a fifth, all hidden inside the DNA of a single child's fingerbone from a cave in Siberia. Here is what I want you to sit with. For the entirety of recorded history, every civilization, every religion, every philosophy, human beings have defined themselves as the singular apex of a long climb, the last one standing. We told ourselves a story where we were the destination. But the Denisovans and the Neanderthals and the other archaic humans we are still discovering tell a different story. For most of human existence, this planet was shared. Multiple kinds of humans, thinking, building, surviving, creating jewelry in freezing caves, adapting to impossible environments, raising children, losing them, continuing anyway. And then, within the last 40,000 years, only one type remained. We don't fully know why. Climate, competition, disease, absorption through interbreeding, some combination of all of these. But we do know this: the Denisovans are not entirely gone. Every time a Tibetan shepherd walks at altitude without gasping, every time a child in Papua New Guinea fights off a pathogen that would devastate someone else, every time a piece of ancient immune code activates in a body that has no idea it's carrying 50,000-year-old instructions, the Denisovans are still here, not as ghosts, as us. The story of humanity is not the story of one species conquering the world alone. It is the story of many kinds of minds, many kinds of human, colliding, merging, and leaving pieces of themselves inside each other. We are not the survivors of that story. We are the sum of it. Drop one thing in the comments. If scientists could fully reconstruct a Denisovan, bring one back, the way they're already discussing with woolly mammoths, should they? And if you want to go deeper, the next video covers the species coming before even the Denisovans, the one that may have given rise to all of us. Subscribe. You're going to want to see what comes next.